Now, we are familiar with the idea of the Sabbath day, so work for 6 days and rest for the seventh. But now God introduces the idea of a Sabbath year. So work the ground for 6 years and then let it rest on the seventh. Verse 2, when you enter the land that I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Now, here is the fascinating thing about this particular command. Once again, God did not supply any reason for it. He just said, this is the command, and I'm asking you to obey on the basis of faith. Trust me. Now, we know, because these things can now be tested and proven, we know that giving the land a fallow year was in fact in their best interests. If you continue to farm on the same plot of land relentlessly, then the nutrients and the minerals in the soil will get depleted over time, and eventually that soil becomes essentially useless. Now, in modern days, we're able to put some of that nutrients back into the land using fertilizer, but in these ancient days, many of those techniques were simply not available. So now we see the wisdom of God. God says, don't harvest the land on that year. Let it grow whatever it wants. Don't sow your fields or prune your vineyards. The land is to have a year of rest. Now, I'm not a gardener, but I have it on good authority that if you let soil just lie fallow, if you let your garden lie fallow for an entire year, you will likely have weeds springing up all over the place. Now, that's annoying when you want to grow things, but in actual fact, they are very useful for bringing nutrients up from deeper soil into the top soil for years to come. Likewise, these fruit trees, these vineyards that are not being harvested, what will happen to the fruit? Well, it will drop off the trees, it will land on the floor, it will begin to disintegrate and degrade and rot and mold, and it will become fertilizer for the soil. So, if you listen to God, you will find out in time that your obedience, even when you didn't have the full picture, your obedience led to your own blessing. Not only that, we read in verse 21 that on the 6th year, God would cause the land to yield a bumper crop to see them through that fallow period on the 7th year. Now, after 7 Sabbath years, so that's 49 years, the next year, the 50th year, was to be a year of Jubilee. This was like a nationwide celebration for the entire year. And on this year, all slaves get to go free. And on this year, all debts are cancelled. And on this year, all land is returned to its rightful owner. So that means if I buy a piece of land from you, I'm buying it from you with the understanding that it's not mine forever. I cannot pass it down to my children because on the 50th year, it reverts back to you and to your family. Now, what an interesting idea, hey? Because if I buy it from you, well, I can use it for the rest of that time before the Jubilee, and I might well do well out of the land. But this kind of great reset, this returning of the land to the rightful owner, it prevents the relentless accumulation of resources that we see take place in our own day by the rich at the expense of the poor. In our world, the richest 25 people on the planet own as much wealth as the poorest 50% of the planet, 3.5 billion people or so. Now, when you actually think of that reality, it boggles the mind just how uneven the playing field is. That through whatever it means, 25 people are permitted to own the same amount of wealth as 50% of the world. For as backwards as many people believe the Bible to be, and Leviticus in particular, who would be able to say there's no wisdom here? Look around at how poorly our own systems and structures have served the people of this very planet. Maybe we should admit that God knows what he's doing. So this idea then of a special year, it is picked up by Jesus in the New Testament. Jesus says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." So Jesus says, this is the year of the Lord's favor, where the playing field is level and poor and rich are treated the same and slave and free are treated the same. And we are living in that era, even now, aren't we? For you and me, it's like every year is the year of Jubilee, where God's grace is freely available to all people. Like it can be just picked off the ground or plucked off the trees. And just as the slaves and the servants had to go free in the year of Jubilee, for those who belong to Jesus, our old master, which is sin, has no hold over us any longer and no claim upon our lives any longer. In Christ, we ourselves are set free.